Greetings, my fellow herbalists. Welcome back to The Plant Path. I'm your host, Sage Popham, founder of the School of Evolutionary Herbalism and Natura Sophia Spagyrics. And well, spring has officially sprung and the birds are chirping, the plants are growing, the earth is moving again. We're getting back out into the garden and getting ready for another cycle with the plants. So it's always a glorious time of year. And we always really appreciate, especially here where I live in the Pacific Northwest, to see some of the cold lifting up, the rain starting to disperse a little bit, and getting back outside to enjoy the splendor of nature, the wonders of the forest, getting out, do some hiking, get up into the mountains, and enjoy outside time. But you know, there are some unfortunate ones among us that going outside comes with a price sometimes in the spring season or summertime, and that is seasonal allergies. Man, what a bummer to have going outside lead to such great discomfort and suffering, to the point where some people just aren't even willing to pay the price and won't go outside and stay indoors during this time of year because their seasonal allergies are so bad, it's just intolerable to even go outside and enjoy. And that is a major bummer and should not be so. So here I want to talk a little bit about this dynamic of seasonal allergies. And I've got a lot to share on this topic. So this is going to be a two-part series. Here I want to just give a little bit of context and introduction to the topic of allergies. And then we'll talk about a twofold strategy approach. One more of a preventative approach to consideration of allergies, which I think is the most important approach. But then also, if it happens, what are some things you can do naturally, holistically, without the use of Claritin or something like that, to ease some of the symptoms that can emerge with hay fever type symptoms and the seasonal allergy thing. So let's talk about this, because I think an interesting observation, an unfortunate observation, is the radical increase in prevalence of allergies in this modern world. And I would say not just allergies, that we're seeing really this increased prevalence of immunological imbalances. Like the human immune system in the modern human has really taken some major hits. And I think there's a lot of factors that could be contributing to this. I don't think there is a one singular root cause of immunological issues that people face. I think it's multifactorial. I think anytime someone says, this is the one thing that's causing all these problems, that's always a little bit of a red flag for me. It's like, well, it might be a contributing cause, but I think the situation is a little more complex than that. But really what we see is not just increased prevalence of allergies, seasonal allergies. We see an increased prevalence of food allergies, food intolerances, which that distinction is important, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And of course, the big one here is the major increased prevalence of autoimmune conditions. These things have skyrocketed over the last number of decades, most notably in developed countries, and even more specifically in people dwelling in more urban environments. A lot of the statistics show that especially autoimmune conditions and things like that tend to be significantly more prevalent in urban environments versus people living in rural environments. Why that is not always explained. Again, I think it's multifactorial. It could be the environment. It could also be based on the types of decisions a person makes, that it might be a little bit different from someone that lives more rurally than someone that lives more in an urban environment, is my guess. But I would say all of these issues, again, are united in that they are related to a generalized imbalance in the state of our immune system. And while there's a lot of theories as to, why this is, again, I think the reality is that there is no one singular taproot cause, but rather it's a complex root ball, a complex network of rhizomes, so to speak, of contributing factors. Certainly, some of those contributing factors could be genetics, right? It's clear that allergies can be passed down genetically. Chronic stress is certainly a major factor here. Some people might say, "What? How could stress contribute to allergies?" Well, it has a lot to do with cortisol and your body's capacity for handling and managing inflammation. And so this is a very simplistic way of explaining it, but generally stress goes up, immunity goes down. Stress goes down, your immunity goes up, meaning that your immune system is much more strong and more tolerant, meaning that it has the ability to tell when it's appropriate to react to something and when maybe it doesn't need to react to something. So chronic stress can be a major contributing factor. Nutrient deficiencies. Oh, and I would just add there with chronic stress, this is a big one with autoimmune stuff. It's very common for the onset of an autoimmune condition or a flare-up of an autoimmune condition to be tied to a period of high stress. It's not always the case, but I've seen in my practice very clear connections between autoimmune flares and things like that with a period of chronic stress. Nutrient deficiencies. Our immune system requires certain nutrients to function properly. If those nutrients are deficient, our immune system is not going to be functioning at an optimal level. Gut permeability. This is a big one. You know, they say a large portion of our immune system is present in the gut. Of course, you know, this is a huge topic. I mean, this could be a whole weekend worth workshop of discussion here with gut permeability, but this is a big one. When the gut is more permeable, things are much more able to cross over the gut wall and enter into the body and trigger an inflammatory / immunological response. And this will generally contribute to an imbalanced immune system over the long term. So gut permeability is a huge factor in addressing this immunological pattern in general, but it is definitely a contributing factor to, well, certainly food intolerance and food allergy, but it also has an impact on seasonal allergies as well, and definitely autoimmunity. A pro-inflammatory diet. If you're eating a lot of ultra-processed foods, a bunch of pro-inflammatory oils are really big there. A lot of the seed oils have been shown to be not so great for the body. Oils that are really high in omega-6 fatty acids or rancid oils, things like that. It's just a pro-inflammatory diet, again, is going to take its toll on the immune system and just make us more prone to inflammation. Chronic infection is a big one there too. Certainly long COVID could play a factor there in terms of immune stress, inflammation. Chronic Epstein-Barr virus can be a contributing factor, things like that. Low-grade chronic infection. Lots of other contributing factors here, but these are some of the main ones that I tend to think of when I'm considering someone that has some sort of immunological imbalance. Now, from a esoteric perspective on this, if we were to look at it through the lens of alchemy or medical astrology or even like constitutional systems, we would say that a lot of these dynamics are related in medical astrology to Mars, who governs the immune system. Mars also governs the adrenals and the stress response. It governs infection, governs inflammation. So a lot of the stuff I'm talking about there relates to Mars. I would also say the sun has a certain degree of relationship to it as well, because the sun relates to our vitality. And if our vitality is depleted, if you're just burned out, it's like the sun provides the baseline vital force for Mars to be able to function properly. And if the sun is weak and deficient, Mars is going to be, let's say, maybe a little more on edge. This is why anytime this is the chronic stress piece, right? If your vitality is drained, you're much more prone to getting sick, immunological weakness, etc. A lot of these patterns tend to be pitta in nature because they're inflammatory and relate to the immune system, fire element type things. Okay, so the next piece I wanted to discuss here is because I feel like in order to explain the strategy of approaching, some of you might be upset, like, come on, just talk about what to do, like what remedies to give. Well, I like to give some context, right? That's what I like when I'm learning something. I don't want to learn like, oh, just take this for that. It's like, I like to know why, like, why am I taking this for that? What is it doing? I think that's the responsible thing to do as an herbalist and as someone that's going to consume something. I think it's good to know why you're taking it. So that's why I'm spending a little bit of time in this video to give some context and background for the allergy situation. And then with that foundation laid, we'll get into more of the strategy of therapeutic approach. So allergy versus intolerance. This is an important distinction because it's something that's really misunderstood by a lot of lay people. I think predominantly a lot of people tend to mistake an intolerance for an allergy. So, and this is especially important in terms of food. So an intolerance is more of a general, your body has a very general reaction to that food that's basically uncomfortable, right? There's general symptomatic patterns that tend to emerge, especially when we're talking about, say, food intolerance. These would be oftentimes like local gastrointestinal symptoms, gas, bloating, heartburn, irritation, things like that in the gut. Sometimes there can be more psychological, cognitive expressions of that. That can be brain fog, even depression, anxiety, irritability can emerge from a food intolerance. And then we can see musculoskeletal type symptoms like achy muscles, achy joints, headaches, fatigue. These are some of the types of patterns that tend to emerge more from a food intolerance. Even something like a casein intolerance. Sometimes people eat the cheese, drink the milk, and they get maybe their asthma, or not asthma, but they get like a little bit of a phlegmatic cough. The asthma is going to be more of an allergy, but they get maybe a little bit of a phlegmatic cough, or they feel phlegmy in their throat. That's going to be more of an intolerance. Like there's a generalized discomfort and symptom associated with it, but it's very different from a true allergy. So when we say the word allergy, we're actually it's actually referring to a very specific biochemical process, that in an immunological process that involves a substance I'm sure you heard of called histamine. These, from the perspective of immunology, is called a type 1 hypersensitivity. And so these are in the form of the immune cells called mast cells. And what happens with an allergy is that the immune system reacts to a substance. And what that causes is a process of degranulation of those mast cells, which contain histamine. So those mast cells degranulate, the histamine inside is released, and then histamine causes the whole spectrum of what we generally consider allergy type symptoms. So these are usually, especially in the case of seasonal allergies, would be allergic rhinitis, which would be our classic hay fever symptoms, the red, itchy, watery eyes, the tingly, itchy, runny nose, the sneezing. It's like this hypersensitive reaction in the upper respiratory tract. This is usually from inhaled environmental allergies, most common form of which would be pollens, tree pollens, grass pollens, even sometimes certain plants, like even aster plants, can cause hay fever symptoms in some people. I remember I was with a friend and I had harvested a bunch of, we were on a road trip and we were driving over the mountains, and the yarrow was in full flower. And I was like, oh, I actually need some yarrow flowers. So we stopped. I harvested a bunch of hawthorn flowers in the mountains, put them in the car. We got back in and started driving. And man, my buddy started erupting, his eyes and his nose. And he just started sneezing. He was like, what is going on? He's like, man, something about that yarrow is like not good for my system. And so that can happen with Asteraceae family plants. Other allergic symptoms can be asthma. So asthma can be triggered by inhalant allergies, but also can be triggered by foods for sure. And then you have atopic conditions or atopy. These would be those really like itchy skin conditions. So skin rashes, hives, eczema. And of course, the most extreme form of an allergic reaction is systemic, which would be anaphylaxis, which of course is very dangerous. Anaphylaxis can kill you. People that have anaphylactic reactions to certain things typically carry what's called an EpiPen. An EpiPen is epinephrine. Epinephrine is an endogenous hormone that is essentially an adrenal hormone that has a very profound anti-inflammatory effect and can stop an anaphylactic reaction. So that the EpiPen is designed for that. It's kind of similar in a way to like a cortisone or cortisol type hormone. These allergies are also, it's mast cells, histamine, also related to what are called IgE antibodies. And so this is oftentimes when people do allergy testing, they're looking for, is the body manufacturing IgE antibodies to a particular substance? Okay. Well, the truth is out. Spring allergies completely suck and no one likes them. And you don't need to suffer needlessly, though. As you've been learning throughout this post, there's lots of things that you can do to prevent seasonal allergies, but when they come, what do you do? Well, I'm going to be talking about that in part 2 of this series, but I also want to let you know that right now over at Natura Sophia Spagyrics, we have our spring capsule collection on sale over there where you can stock up on your herbs to support the health of your upper respiratory tract, your sinuses, your throat, support your immune system, your body's healthy inflammatory response, and all of that. So we have a lot of those great herbs and formulas on sale right now to help support the health of your upper respiratory tract and your body's healthy response to pollens and allergens. So head on over to naturasophiaspagyrics.com, check out our spring capsule collection, and make it so that you don't have to let allergies completely ruin your outside time during this beautiful time of year. And with that, let's get back to part 1 of the allergy strategy. So the other kind of foundational concept that I want to talk about is the inflammatory load or the immunological load. And when I learned about this makes a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense to me. It helped me really understand the preventative strategy, right? So a lot of what I'm explaining, so what I just explained there has a lot to do with generally what you would do in an acute allergic moment to remedy it. Here, this is more referring to the kind of the underlying background info that's useful for understanding more of a long-term preventative approach to allergies. And so this involves the inflammatory load. So the way that I like to think about this is our body has a certain threshold for inflammation. It has a certain threshold for substances that maybe we are intolerant to or maybe allergic to. And I think this actually applies a little more to intolerance than true allergy, but we have a certain tolerance for those things that our body has the capacity to adequately handle that, say, intolerant trigger, that inflammatory trigger, to handle it, take care of it in a way that keeps us asymptomatic. So the way I like to think of that is that we have like this bucket that can be 100 units worth of inflammatory load to maintain asymptomatic. So say, for example, you have a sensitivity to cat dander and you've got a cat. And that cat dander takes up 75% of your inflammatory capacity. So you're asymptomatic, right? Your body's like, okay, I don't like the cat dander. It makes me a little inflamed, but I can handle it. I have the capacity to tolerate it, and you're not going to have any symptoms. And then maybe you eat, you have a little bit of a problem with some dairy or some gluten or something. And what did I say? The cat dander, 70 points of inflammatory load. And then maybe the gluten or the dairy that you eat every once in a while takes up 25 units of inflammatory load. So now you're sitting at 95 points out of your 100. The bucket is close to full of inflammatory capacity. Your body can tolerate it, it can handle it, you're still asymptomatic. Springtime rolls around, right? And the grasses are releasing their pollen, and you walk outside and say those grasses are 30 points of inflammatory load. Now you bumped up from 95 to 125. The bucket has overfilled, and now you are expressing inflammatory symptoms. Your body has reached its threshold, its capacity for tolerating those inflammatory triggers, and now you become symptomatic. And so the general approach to this is reduce the bucket, like empty the bucket, reduce the overarching inflammatory triggers in your life to decrease that bucket. So if, say, maybe you don't sleep with the cat in your bed anymore, right? And the cat sleeps in the living room, and now your cat dander tolerance is from 70 and now it's down at 30. And maybe you're still eating the gluten and that's another 30, or at 60. And then you encounter the grass and that's another 30, and you're at 90 and you're asymptomatic, right? Because you basically just eliminated, and if these are, of course, made up numbers, I'm just using it as an example. So it's like, these aren't actual like real numbers that you would see on blood work. It's just an illustration of the principle of inflammatory tolerance, or what we might think of as the allergic load, what your body's capacity is to handle while keeping you asymptomatic. So this is really the fundamental, I would say, concept or principle or thing to keep in mind when you're thinking about approaching and addressing allergies from a preventative perspective, to reduce that load, so that hopefully when you want to go outside in the spring and summertime and enjoy yourself in nature, you don't end up with super uncomfortable hay fever type symptoms. I think this concept also illustrates something that I've noticed happen in people that I know, in members of my family, as well as among clients, which is this dynamic of growing out of a childhood allergy that can then come back later on in life. So if you think, you're a little kid and your immune system's developing, it's really sensitive and it reacts to things, and you have an allergy, and maybe you cut that thing out and it goes away, or you don't figure out what the problem is, and then all of a sudden it just goes away. Right? You don't get that itchy skin thing when the kid eats the gluten or whatever. Or their asthma seems to just kind of stabilize a little bit. Well, one of the ways of thinking about that is that this could possibly be due to endocrine maturation, like a maturation of the adrenal glands, and increased production and capacity of cortisol, right? Which cortisol, gets a bad rap all the time, but it's actually a really good hormone. It's very useful because it is our body's endogenous anti-inflammatory compound. When you become inflamed, the body secretes cortisol to tolerate and handle and deal with and manage that inflammation. Of course, there's a lot more involved in inflammatory, process and things like that in the body, but cortisol is a big part of that. So a theory, an idea behind this would be that as the adrenals mature, as cortisol production becomes more optimized and sufficient, the body can tolerate that allergy or that thing that the body was previously earlier on in childhood reacting to. But then if you're continuing to do that thing, and in general have other lifestyle factors that tend to be pro-inflammatory, your, say, inflammatory capacity, rather the bucket being 100 points worth of inflammatory load, as we age and say we live a high stress lifestyle, eat a pro-inflammatory diet, interact with things that our body is intolerant to, whether that be in the form of foods or animals or danders or environmental things, whatever it might be, that load capacity can go from maybe 100 to maybe 60, like the bucket shrinks. This can especially be true and this kind of relates to adrenal health, where if you are inflamed all the time and have a high stress lifestyle, over time that can lead to a degree of, and I don't like to say adrenal fatigue because you can't really isolate the adrenal glands. So I really like to think of it more as like HPA axis deficiency or imbalance, rather. That HPA axis being the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. So those would be the master glands in the brain, which control and regulate really your whole body in some ways, but the endocrine system, right? So the hypothalamus and the pituitary are controlling the thyroid, the adrenals, the gonads, like all kinds of aspects of our endocrine system, and therefore really the whole body. So if you're living high stress, you're high inflammation all the time chronically, you enter a phase of HPA deficiency. Now your body's ability to manufacture and secrete cortisol is decreased. What's going to happen if you can't put out enough cortisol? All of a sudden, your inflammatory capacity is decreased. So now maybe even the cat laying on your bed at night never caused you problems. Now all of a sudden, it's causing problems. Or you had childhood problems with gluten, it went away, you kept eating the gluten, and then all of a sudden in your early 40s, now you eat gluten and all these problems start to happen. Why is that? Well, a theory, and I think it makes sense, it's logical, would be that the body's inflammatory capacity has become deficient, is decreased. The bucket has shrank. So now, where before it needed 100 points of inflammatory tolerance, now it's down to 60 or 50 or whatever. And when the body is constantly bombarded by things like that, this is how, as the theory goes, one has the potential to develop autoimmune type conditions, because the immune system is just under an onslaught. It's having to handle and tolerate and deal with so much stuff that it can come to a point where it becomes so hypersensitive and so reactive that it can start to react and attack our body's endogenous tissues and produce a variety of autoimmune type conditions. Perhaps it happens in the thyroid and you develop autoimmune Hashimoto's thyroiditis, or perhaps it affects the nervous system and the brain and the spine, and multiple sclerosis can develop. Perhaps it's more, can impact the connective tissue, musculoskeletal system, and in the form of something like lupus. So the point is that there is actually a connection between, intolerance, allergy, and autoimmunity, and there can be a progression there. So this is why, in general, for people that have a lot of allergies and intolerances to things, that can be a little bit of a canary in the coal mine, so to speak, that's important to address. It's not just, seasonal allergies, these suck, these are annoying, these are uncomfortable. It could be like, well, hey, this could indicate that your immune system is under a little bit of stress. Your body has maxed out its inflammatory capacity, and there's some things to look at in the lifestyle of the person and the diet. There's some remedials that can be done in the form of herbs and supplements and nutrients and things like that can really help prevent those things from happen, and not just prevent those things from happen, but actually start to correct the underlying issues that could be contributing to that, which could actually be setting someone up for a life that is, in the long term, more vital, more healthy, and preventing potentially more serious conditions. Now, I want to be clear, that doesn't mean that everyone that has seasonal allergies is going to develop an autoimmune condition. So don't mistake me for saying that. That's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that there is a possibility, there's a potential, because there's an indication of immunological and inflammatory stress. So this is some of the context, some of the backstory, so to speak, for understanding the allergy strategy. Of course, I didn't actually get into the strategy itself, but this lays the foundation, lays the context for it. Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below if you're watching on YouTube. And if you're watching or listening anywhere other than our website, head on over to evolutionaryherbalism.com. Be sure to sign up for our email list so you can get updates on everything that's happening, all of our freshest, newest content that we're publishing on the Plant Path. You also get announcements for when we are enrolling in our courses for the School of Evolutionary Herbalism. Be the first to know and get special discounts and extra bonuses when you enroll. So be sure to check that out. Hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already. And I appreciate you watching and listening to the end. That in and of itself really does help to support the channel. And appreciate you making it to the end. Be sure to tune in next week if you're watching this as it's released. I'll be putting out part 2 of this little series here on allergies, where I will talk about some of our strategic approach in terms of prevention and therapeutics for how you can consider addressing seasonal allergies. So thanks so much for making it to the end of this. I do truly appreciate it. Until the next one, take care and be well.